What's going on, YouTube? This is Jim Afanis, and today I want to talk to you guys about Bloodborne, specifically my final thoughts on the game. I decided I'm going to do a video series as I finish games known as my final thoughts, in which I actually complete a game that I bought and talk to you guys about my impressions on it. Now, if you have not played anything from the company From Software, which includes Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Demon Souls, or obviously Bloodborne, you may not want to watch because there are going to be some pretty big spoilers, specifically with Bloodborne, but I'm going to dive a little bit into the Souls games. So if you haven't played any of those or the DLC, see you later. For the rest of y'all, welcome to my thoughts on Bloodborne. Now, my friend Brent always says I was sold out, which is why I took a break from so many games. I grinded out Dark Souls 1, went right into 2, and then kind of into Bloodborne in a very short amount of time. And yeah, I could say I was definitely burnt out a little bit. Both Dark Souls games, I logged well over 200 hours when it was all said and done, considering the original game plus the new game plus. Bloodborne, I clocked in about 85 hours. Now, I am one of those players who likes to take a really, really long time in just leveling and leveling and leveling. I want to go to the final boss and be like, boop, and just watch him explode because I worked so hard at, getting my character into that, power mode. And this game was no different. Now, unlike Dark Souls 2, which had the soul memory, this game completely removes soul memory. In other words, you can grind enemies infinitely. So if you find a spot that you like, and one of my better videos, I think it's over like 5,000 views. I talk about a really good spot to grind souls early on in Dark Souls to get some twin blood shards to kind of level up your weapons quickly. But there's a lot of different places you can grind, and you don't even have to grind, really. The game's kind of designed that if you kind of progress through the story and just kind of do what it says, you'll be okay. But I like to just keep running through towns over and over, and it works well for me because I get to get a bunch of crazy loot, and I'm really powerful for boss battles, and I don't have to rely so much on my twitchy or lack of twitchy gameplay mechanics. I can just power through with good old gusto. So the things I loved about the game, I love the setting, I love the ambiance, I love the graphic design of this game. It takes place in this weird kind of gothic universe. It's definitely around late 1800s, like England or something. A lot of smoky alleyways, and just the costumes and the character and the designs in the world are very, very well put together. The graphics in of themselves are pretty darn good. Obviously, this is a PlayStation 4 exclusive. So there wasn't any parodying for the Xbox One or the PC. This is just kind of the system they decided to run with. There was some slowdowns here and there, which is a little frustrating for really no reason. The game never ran over 30 frames a second. There was a couple instances where you're in a hallway and it looked really smooth, maybe up to 40, 45 frames a second. But for the most part, it was pretty solid. I mean, the slowdowns did occur randomly. It didn't really affect the game too much because it was always in the middle of an action. But it's still there really is no reason for that. And the game isn't overly complex, by the way, either. By design of the game, there are a lot of corners and hallways, and they don't want you to have long stretches of viewing things because they want guys to jump out of the corners and grab you, There's a lot of outdoor elements, and the draw distance is absolutely incredible when you're standing up on some of these tall buildings looking out into the city below. Even when you go later on into some of the caves and some of the weirder places, you can definitely see stuff way out in the horizon. You're like, I want to get to that. And sometimes it lets you do it. Sometimes it's just a set piece. But overall, I have to say the graphics and just the styling of the game work really, really well. The weapons feel very strong. The weaker weapons are definitely quicker. The way that there's lines, trails, when you swing a weapon quickly, as opposed to a really big, slow Kirk hammer. That looks well too. So overall, just the ambiance that comes from the game in both audio. I didn't talk about audio, but it sounds great. It just really feels good, and it really does feel like you're set in that world. Gameplay is a little bit different than some previous Dark Souls games. No longer do you get to hide behind a shield. You actually have to kind of be out there and aggressive. You do get a gun, which is used solely as an offensive ability. Defensive ability. That's what makes it so unique. Unlike other games where you just stand at range and just pop things off with a gun, the gun is used solely to stagger enemies. So right as an enemy's about to hit you, hit them with the gun. And when you hit them with the gun, they go, ooh, and there's a special noise, when you did it right. and you go in for what they call a visceral attack, which is an incredibly powerful damage. But that's the risk and reward. You can play it safe and just kind of stand on the edge and jab and kind of circle around if that's what you want to do. Or if you want to get in there and just, you know, be brutal and just, I don't care, I'm swinging through everything. You could do that too. You'll probably die though. But no longer can you just stand there behind the shield like you could in Dark Souls, turtle up, and then just counterattack. This one is actually very, very aggressive, and it rewards you for being aggressive. And some of the boss fights do have, not enrage timers, but they grow stronger over time, and this is definitely your advantage if you can use these counter abilities early on and, you know, drop enemies' health very rapidly. So it pays to be aggressive. There's one-handed, two-handed weapons. There's the trick attack weapons. Obviously, like an axe, like suddenly extends, and now it's like a long axe. Where your saw blade, you snap a thing, and like a longer piece comes out for range. The Kirk hammer is a sword and a hammer in one. Go figure. So the weapons work well. The combat, other than the parry system or the counter system, is very, very similar to everything you've seen in Dark Souls. There's still energy bars. There's still stamina bars, that sort of thing. Not a lot of magic, rather. There's only very few abilities you can do. There are some different like tokens you can get. Like you could get this bestial rage where you can like yell, and you have to have your abilities up high enough for that. I only dabbled with that in New Game Plus just to see what it was like. But I'm a traditional guy. I like sword and board. I like maxing out my strength, my vitality, and my endurance, and that's it. I don't care about luck. I don't think this game has luck, actually. I don't care about any of the arcane stuff. Just give me a weapon, let me hit hard, and let me circle and roll around and have a bunch of stamina to do what I need to do, lock on targets, and that's just how I played pretty much the entire game. So pretty boring in that sense, I guess. I didn't really experience a lot of the crazy stuff. Fundamentally, the game works on every level. What makes a From Software game a From Software game is obviously the ridiculously aloof story, as it were. This game is no different. If you're a fan of the other Dark Souls games, you'll remember that most items are the actual story themselves. There's not much story that is told to you in the game. You may get a very brief narrative, but the majority of the game is found by reading item descriptions and talking with NPCs who talk to you in weird tongues, who just give you bits and pieces of the story, and it's kind of up to you to put together the master understanding of the story. Bloodborne is no different. Now, what hurt me with Bloodborne a little bit is I took a couple breaks in between the games, so there are times I'm like, wait, what's going on here? That's my own fault, but I will say that as a whole, to me, Bloodborne's story is a lot thinner than Dark Souls. It's meant for more of a casual audience. In that sense, there's not a lot of NPCs, and there's not a lot of real long-lasting side quest story missions that carry through. And that's not to say there aren't a few, because there are. But if you look at the spectrum of what Dark Souls 2, for example, did with all the NPCs and all the different factions and all the different side quests helping out people along your adventure, you didn't really have that in Bloodborne so much. You had a few characters who helped you out and a few side stories that were there to investigate, but for the most part, it was pretty cut and dry. Go forward, slay beasts. That's kind of the main focus of this game, was all about the beasts. And what made this game's pacing really well, kind of tying into the story, was that as you beat certain enemies, the phases of the moon change. Now, this game is supposed to take place during a single night. So when you start off, you know, the moon's kind of happy, and then as time goes on, the moon gets darker and lower, and it becomes pale blood, which is a very focal point of this game, the phases of the moon and blood types. As the moon gets lower, the enemies get tougher. They become more, there's more of them. You'll start to see things you didn't necessarily see before with like the amygdalas. And I don't want to go too deep dive into that. There's a lot of people who do much, much better jobs on YouTube of explaining all of this than me. I'm just telling you from a gamer standpoint, there was not a lot of stuff to sink your teeth into like there was on the Dark Souls series. Now, very similar to Dark Souls, this is where some of the spoilers start to come in. There is no good ending. No matter what you do, you're boned. So basically, you're just some dude who was sent to this magic town who has magic blood, and the magic blood can cure you. You sign a contract by taking the magic blood, which turns you into a hunter, which means like basically to pay back your debt, you have to go basically eradicate all the evil from this town. When you get to the very end of the game, it's interesting. There's 3 different endings, depending on how you played through the game. Actually, there's only one ending that's like a unique, like they call it the true ending, and that's by collecting these umbilical cords, which make you immune to this evil. There are 2 regular just endings. You don't have to do anything. But no matter what you do, you're going to get hurt. And that's what makes this game so interesting, is that the cycle continues again. No matter if you slay all the beasts in the world, you have the option of either basically being killed, which you'll awaken in a different place and time, and you won't have any memory of the things you did. You can fight back, but you're ultimately absorbed by a greater evil. Or if you took these umbilical cords, you can fight back and then fight back the greater evil, but then you ultimately become the greater evil. So no matter what you do, you're basically destined to a doomed world. And if you've played From Software games, you kind of know that's going to happen. No matter how much hope there is in the world, no matter how much sorrow is coming around, and you're just a little beacon of light trying to spread goodness out to the world, no matter what you do, it always comes back. And I knew that going into this game, and I knew that From Software likes to send these bleak messages of despair, but, does it take away from the story? Not really. Although I gotta say now, being the 3rd Dark Souls game that I've played, and I interchangeably use Bloodborne and Dark Souls because they are so similar. I did not play Demon Souls yet. I heard there might be a remaster. I hope there is. I'd like to check it out. But knowing that the game is always going to end in despair, it didn't really take away so much from the punchline for me on this one per se. I don't know what the canon ending is. They have loosely confirmed there will be some sort of sequel on this game. It's not going to be a one-off. But either way, the evil will continue, and we will come anew, and we will have to fight these beasts once again and work our way through the city. And history is doomed to repeat itself. The city will remain cursed. Whether you took whatever ending, evil is going to reign supreme once again. And again, knowing that, it doesn't bother me so much. And this game really is kind of light on the story, and I think that's my big takeaway from this video, and I hope you guys take away from this video, is it's fun, but it really is Dark Souls light in just about every capacity. Maybe a little bit with the combat system. Maybe you could say Bloodborne's got a slight edge in the combat system. I'm not talking about graphics or gameplay or anything like that. I'm just talking about just the overall Dark Souls experience. You're going to get less NPCs. You're going to get less quests. You're going to get less lore to discover. A lot of the item descriptions are not really useful in any capacity. They don't really send out like a greater message into the world. They just kind of exist. You get a lot of loading screens of characters and hunters past that if you don't really deep dive into the game, they're not even, you won't even find them. You won't find their items. You won't find their weapons. And it really doesn't amount to much of anything. At the end of the day, you're just going to be like, oh yeah, there was some other hunter named Hendrik who was out there before, and there's some other guy over here doing this thing, and okay, see you later, dude. I need to go get a bigger weapon, so I gotta go smash some faces in. And that's kind of how the game ultimately rolled out. So I know it sounds like I'm crapping on it. I'm really not. I enjoyed it. But, when you take a step back and you're not like, oh, in the moment, like, oh my God, I can't believe that's how it ended. And when the credits roll and the game ends and, that's it. You kind of look back on it and you're like, okay, I don't know. I mean, they hit all the right notes. They have the great level design, the very intricate level design with a lot of shortcuts that wrap around each other. The game is very grotesque. I mean, I'm not just talking just the sheer amounts of blood, but some of the really weird creatures and demons you face. One of the central points of this game is your eye and seeing the world, seeing the cosmos for what it really is. And towards the end, you find these really horrific, like, pigs that have, like, 50 eyes on their face and this, like, weird drool coming out of their mouth. And they're kind of eerie. You fight this giant brain thing. There's spiders with human faces on them. There's this overturned lecture hall where everybody's turned into these weird demons and their heads, like, spin around, like, Exorcist style. Very, very different, and it does kind of set you back. Not like jump at you, not like a jump scare like Outlast or any of those other like horror type games or PT, for example, but more just like, man, that's creepy, like the weirdness that's going on in this world that you have to endure. And when you fight enemies and they die, they have these really horrific, like blood-curdling screams, and you hear a lot of screams and like, horror going on in the background. So in that sense, it almost kind of feels like a survival horror game, but it really is grounded more in that action RPG element where you're trying to find better gear and better equipment as you work your way through the story. So Final thoughts on Bloodborne. I just wanted to lay them out for you guys. Again, a lot of you guys have already beat the game. The new DLC, The Old Hunters, is out. You probably already beat all that. I'm just getting around to beating it. I'm glad I did. I think I'm a better gamer for it. I did enjoy this experience. I'm glad that From Software is trying something outside of Dark Souls, and it's not as heavy. It's more casual in that sense of storytelling, but it still maintains this really true heavy, combat, this deep combat experience that is incredibly punishing. That remains, but they lighten up on the story a little bit. So maybe people who are a little, you go on the Dark Souls wiki and it's like 7,000 lines of code and you're like, wait, this is too much for me to handle. You may find a little bit more enjoyment in Bloodborne, where you can at least say, okay, I kind of have got the experience down. I understand how it works. I understand that I'm punished for dying. I understand that it's in my best interest to, take my time and backtrack everything, because there is some hidden gems in this game, and I didn't uncover all of it, but I got a pretty good feel for it. So anyways, that's everything I think about Bloodborne. You'll probably never hear me talk about it again. I don't plan on playing it anymore. It's going in the vault, and I am moving on to greater games and greater adventures. And what a great year for gaming. If you haven't had a chance to check out Brent and I's review of gaming, I'm going to put a link in the description below. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.